All right, so I'm just going to wrap us all up this evening, go back, remind everybody what we've talked about throughout the course of this course and some of the ideas we came up with, some of the things you all talked about in the discussions on the TED Ed. And if we have time at the end, I'd love to do a little brainstorming about where you want to go from here and ideas that you've generated throughout this course. So we'll see how much time we have. I will see if I can go to my next slide. Let's see, now my mouse isn't moving. There we go. All right, so the first session I began by opening things up with our problem-based motivations. We've been through this several times. I introduced it at the beginning. We've gone through it with every presentation. So here's just once more a reminder of some of the topics we touched on and who presented on each of those topics. We did have these final 3 topics that didn't get a presenter, so those were not things we were able to go into more depth in the course. But these were the ones that we did cover, and I will go through each of those individually right now. We started with Masato Kikuchi on scope of information, array of viewpoints, I believe it was. Available materials sometimes are just not conducive to that type of interaction the instructor wishes to accomplish. And so Masato showed us a wonderful information gap activity that he had created using HTML and JavaScript. So for those of you with coding skills, that's an excellent example of how to create that type of information gap activity where students are not just reading directly all from the same text or don't have all the same pieces of information, but that gap exists so that they have to interact with each other in order to get the missing information. And this specific activity he came up with was, who has seen my missing cat? So lots of different cat pictures, different colors. You had to identify the cat. Did the cat have a long tail or a short tail? Was it white? Was it brown? Was it gray? And each student then would chime in and say, well, this is the cat that I saw. Oh, that's not my cat. So it was a great activity. Many people, myself included, said, that sounds great, but I have no idea how to create that on my own. And so one of the things we did was to also brainstorm ways to make an activity like this without having that coding expertise. And within the discussion forum later, I found all of these ideas that you all had presented and come up with in both tools that you could use and then different types of activities that would be similar to this. So everything from VoiceThread, Google Slides, Hot Potatoes, Dropbox, Zaption. I know Zaption has ceased to exist as of a month or 2 ago, and I couldn't remember off the top of my head the new name, if there is one, but I know EdPuzzle. And then Olga talked about PlayPosit, which is also similar to a video editing tool where you can put interactive quizzes into your videos. You could use authentic websites, text chat, use the LMS with breakout rooms, Google Hangouts. These were all ideas to create an information gap activity. And some of the ideas that you came up with were to describe a famous person. So I'm describing the person, you don't know who it is, you have to come up with who is this person I'm talking about. Somebody talked about different national flags that have colors. So you're describing the colors or the picture on the flag, and the other person has to say what country that is. Shopping in a store, counting money, maybe describing your favorite movie without the title. The person has to come up with the title. A detective and witnesses to a crime. What did you see? What did this person see? Putting things together to see who committed the crime. Describing a recipe, giving directions on a map, planning a vacation, buying a car. Somebody even said, where's Waldo? So you can look at that discussion thread for this lesson on TED Ed to go into more detail about what people came up with to create these information gap activities. Then we are going to go Let's see, we'll do it here. Okay, session 2, Ursula Stickler, leveraging technology. So taking text-based information and moving it online, and what are some of the unique affordances that technology can give us that we can't get out of a textbook or paper and pencil activities. Ursula showed us Padlet, and she let us try out placing those sticky notes in the different categories. So here's an example from one of the slides that she used where we were talking about Zoom and whether the webinar or the meeting worked better for different aspects of instruction. And we were all then able to go in and place our sticky notes on which aspects we thought worked better in each of those 2 areas of Zoom. And Ursula also did a good job of showing us the necessity of always having a plan B when it comes to technology. We just discussed that in our Q&A. What do you do when the technology doesn't work? And for some of us, the technology didn't work. So she had screenshots. She had already planned, what do you do in the case that some students maybe can't get into Padlet or can't access things? You always need to have that backup plan. She compared Padlet with Linowit. And the takeaway from that was to always assess the functionality and the pedagogy of a tool based on what you want the learner to do, not on how new or nifty the tool is. So we've heard about backward design several times throughout this webinar, looking at what do you want the learner to accomplish, and then working backwards from there to give them the tools that they need to accomplish that task. And how can you take the tool, the online tool, and leverage it so that students are gaining something from it that they couldn't necessarily gain from simply using the textbook. In addition, then she put us into some breakout rooms and asked us to complete a basic task introducing ourselves. This is something that I'm sure we all have our beginning students work on in the target language, but we used Voki, and then we discussed that experience as a group. So afterwards, our discussion included talking about accessibility and screen readers, and we will touch on that again on one of our last presentations because we went more in depth on that on accessibility, but looking at which types of websites are accessible if you're using a screen reader and how can you make your lessons more accessible. Making those lessons available in archives. So somebody mentioned that it's a great help that we have this live webinar, but then later you can go back, rewatch it, pause it, rewind it, look over it, go into more depth in the things that you're more interested in and look things up and find the links. So having that archive available. She showed us a wonderful website from the Council of Europe, which was an inventory of tools for online language teaching. And you can filter tools based on what you want to do, what type of language skill, what type of interaction, the pedagogical function. And that is, I have linked here, but that is also in her presentation. So if you go to the TED Ed and go into the presentation, she shows you that one as well. We talked about the differences between synchronous and asynchronous online courses. So what can you leverage best in the synchronous mode? What works better and which tools lend themselves more to an asynchronous course. And she showed us this pyramid of online teaching. I know it's probably a little small on your screen over here. But she talked about you know, the foundation of online teaching and how you build your skills as an online teacher. And you can go back and look at that within her presentation as well. And then a really interesting study that she did on eye tracking in online instructors. So they did an eye tracking study as instructors were teaching online. What were they paying attention to? And one of the things they found was that the more experience the online teachers had, the less time they spent looking at the actual technology itself, and the more time they spent dealing with content and instruction. So it does show that as beginning online instructors, we probably spend more time dealing with where's the text chat, how do I get the screen to show up, and things like that, to when we get more experienced, we're able to move that into the automatic sphere and deal more with the teaching and learning. But that was really interesting. Okay, Junda, ideas and tools for incorporating authentic materials for online teaching. You want to go out into the web, you want to find authentic materials, you want to use it in your classroom. How do you go about doing that? So he identified 3 different areas. First of all, selection and preparation. How do you find what it is that you want to use? The first thing he brought up was to weed out the unwanted. So he showed us how to crop images for use in online lessons, for both pictures and videos and web pages. And all of that is also in his presentation at TED-Ed. And I didn't catch the name of the trimming video site that he used, but I did get the imageresize.org. If you find larger pictures online, but you just want to focus, he, for example, showed us, I think, a subway map. And it was a very large subway map, but he just wanted his students to focus on a smaller area. So he was able to resize that, or even just using Jing to take a screenshot and then cropping that screenshot so that you only have in your images what it is you want to work with. So, oh, tube chop. Is that right, Sandra? You just put that in there. So that is, yeah, taking YouTube videos and trimming those videos. Once you've found the information that you want to use, you need to scaffold. So support for learning, helping students with comprehension and cultural understanding. One way to do that would be to create a vocabulary list. So we have Quizlet, we have vocabulist.com, and also glossing and annotation. And today we touched a little bit with Emily on using Google Translate, things like that. So how do you help your students to comprehend what it is you're presenting to them? And then practice and application. How do you get input? How do you get output? How do you get interaction? Those are all the necessary elements for second language acquisition. He showed us Kahoot, quizzes, Quizlet Live, TED-Ed, and even social media. So all of those were great ideas for taking authentic materials off of the web and adapting them for your course work. Then we heard on session 3, Marta Gonzalez-Llore and Greg Kessler. So Marta talked about language variety. There's so many different types of language within each of our target languages. And how do we present all of those to our students? And how do we explain to them how that works, where they're spoken, what they should be using, what they might hear in different areas. So she began by giving us a sample dialogue, and then we discussed in what ways it was or was not authentic, and in many ways we didn't think that it was particularly authentic, so we thought about ways that we could find more authentic dialogue. We discussed situations where language varieties were culturally insensitive or perhaps excluded geographical issues. She told us the story of when in some Spanish-speaking cultures, if you're offered something, you're never supposed to say yes the first time. You'll always be offered again, and it would be rude to respond yes the first time. So teaching students that this might be the case in one place, but not in a different Spanish-speaking area. And that it's very difficult to target everybody's needs because different people are looking to learn about the languages in different areas. She showed us an example of EdPuzzle. So that is, I think, what a lot of people have landed on as an option to Zaption, since Zaption has gone away. Quizzing and interaction within videos. If you remember this video, she showed us to talk about the difference between US English, British English, and Australian English. And another way that you could do that would be with comic strips. Students could write their own captions, and students could also use these tools themselves to create content for their classmates. So they're creating with the language, and then you have that student output for student input. which was one of our topics, but we did not have a presenter on. So the Kahoot game, also on lexical and pragmatic variation, was another example of how to simply expose students to those different types of languages. Then we had Greg Kessler, who talked about his official topic was topicality or current relevance. He gave us a subtitle of how to adapt available materials to establish connection with popular trends and events. And he began by introducing us to this idea of participatory culture, which he got from Henry Jenkins, which came from Clay Shirky from the book Cognitive Surplus, Generosity in a Connected Age. And the definition or the elements of this participatory culture, especially within social media, is that it has relatively low barriers for engagement. Pretty much anyone can engage. Strong support for sharing creations with others. Think Facebook, think social media. Informal mentorship. People learn from each other within these levels within this culture. It doesn't have to be formal, but everybody learns from everybody else. Members believe that their contributions matter, and we care about others' opinions of self and work. So within that participatory culture, we have social media, new media, and Greg introduced us to how that can cultivate contexts and artifacts that have a lot of benefits. They're linguistically rich because they're being created by so many different people. They are authentic because they're real world. They are diverse. They are complex. They are compelling because they're up to date, they're current, they're evolving, it's new every day, and they are participatory. So all of those things make them very compelling for foreign language learning because they're not textbook language. They're not just basic ideas. They are real world ideas and things that we may care more about and your learners may care more about. So tools, tools, tools. Greg showed us a plethora of online tools that can be used with this type of language and within this type of participatory culture. And I won't go through and read all of these, but you can see amongst this list a lot of social media, Twitter, Facebook, comic strip creation sites like Toondo, Bitstrips, quizzing, EdPuzzle, Kahoot, presentations like Prezi, Educa has digital realia. So we talk about, we've always used realia. We've been encouraged to use realia in our classroom. Now we have all this digital realia that we can access. Video game culture, digital storytelling, TED Talks. There are TED Talks out there in a myriad of different languages. And one really exciting area I thought was in this augmented reality. Think Pokemon Go. Going out and walking around with your mobile device and being able to access things in the target language out in the real world in an augmented reality space. He showed us an example of a room that was built so that the online activities felt more real, where things were presented all around the room so that as you were maybe playing a game or doing something online, it seemed more like real life. Google Maps, Google Hangout, memes, and I'll show you how he used those here in just a second. So mixing this participatory culture with current events. He's looking at topicality or current relevance. Some of the things he brought up were current events going on online, for example, the creepy clowns, the election, or he had found some really interesting places where on Amazon, the comments on products on Amazon had gone viral. So all of these things are completely real world. They are things that the students could go and access on their own, but you can also use the target language to talk about. Fan fiction, so rewriting classic literature, looking at Harry Potter and how could we write a story that continues the story of Harry Potter, but we're going to do that in the target language. Ways that we can contribute to the real world with the target language such as Wikipedia. Going on to Wikipedia, he showed us the site for Ohio University and showed that although there were a lot of explanations in English, there weren't necessarily those in other languages. So going on and just starting with your college on Wikipedia and doing entries in the target language so that those are accessible for people who might want to access that on the website. Creating videos instead of essays. Rather than writing a paper essay, creating a video, having that type of enhanced input with the video can just be different and more interesting. And as he put it, it might be more interesting for us to grade in some cases as well. Simultaneous participation. He showed us how he had up to 5 people in one Google Doc and how they were interacting with each other as they were creating within the Google Doc. Memes are a great jumping off point. So you start with a meme, you discuss what it's talking about, maybe the students create their own. Video games, Minecraft. He talked about some classes at Ohio University, one of which was journaling the zombie apocalypse. So it was a writing course, and they were journaling within a Minecraft world that was the zombie apocalypse. And so how can this, again, augmented reality or not actual reality be taken into the writing and the language development? And an ESL course that was all based on the Serial podcast, a very popular podcast that many people were watching, many people were discussing here in the USA, and taking that and creating an entire course around it so that ESL students would watch a podcast every week, journal about it, talk about it, create content based around it. So finding these current events and this current information and creating coursework based around it. I can't remember if it was Arizona State that created the Mentira game, which was a Spanish-speaking game where students would go out into the Spanish-speaking neighborhood around their campus and solve a mystery. And they had to actually go out and walk around and find the clues. And it was all created in Spanish so that the students could work outside of the classroom. And this augmented reality, the Pokemon Go idea, campus tagging, walking around campus with your mobile device, pointing at different things and getting information in the target language or tagging things in the target language. So those were all really interesting ideas about current events. Tracy Seiler talked to us about addressing multiple modes of communication. She is a Latin instructor, and she talked a lot about focusing on oral output, which of course was interesting because most of us would not consider Latin a language that uses a lot of oral output, but she does in her online courses. She's very standards-based. She talked a lot about basing the courses on those ACTFL standards and then focusing on the presentational and interpersonal communication. And one thing she found very important was building that professional learning network, building relationships with local to state to national, other teachers and administrators so that you're not constantly reinventing the wheel. And I think that's really important to remember that there are all of us out there within our communities and around the world who are really trying to accomplish the same thing. And we need to work together, especially when it comes to creating content, that if we reach out to each other, we don't all have to sit in our little silos and create this new material that we can work together to come up with some great stuff that we can all access. Again, backward course design was mentioned, starting with the big picture. What is it you want them to learn about? Theme-based, context-based, and then work backwards. Give them the skills they need to fill in that big picture. Integrated performance assessments at the end, rather than a pencil and paper test. What do we want students to be able to do? And in order to prove that they can do it, have them actually do it and have that be the performance assessment. And that's what they get their grade for. We tell them in the beginning what we want them to learn. We give them the tools to learn it. And at the end of the lesson, we say, can you do it or can you not do it? You knew this is what you were going to have to do. Have you gotten to that point? And that's the assessment. So it's generally a pretty popular way amongst the students to assess students because they know all along what their goal is, what they need to accomplish. And for us, it's great to say you're able to do this, and that also fits in with the can-do statements. I can, I can, I can. Along with that, in the multiple modes of communication, we practiced creating lesson plans, which moved the materials from the interpretive to either the interpersonal or the presentational mode. So she gave us this example of translating the poems of Marshall that were in Latin, and moving them into our own language and writing, or moving from just reading for understanding to that interpersonal mode, or even going as far as the presentational mode. Some of the ideas that you all came up with were to write their own endings or morals, to relate the text to current events. We talked a lot, some of these were very political in nature, and how do they relate to politics today? Obviously a huge topic, 2 weeks from the election, or related to hip hop. Maybe Hamilton, something like that, of how does that compare? Synthesize the message and the purpose is a little bit interpretive. Have a conversation using phrases from the poem. So there's the interpersonal where you take the phrases, and some of them were rather snarky and biting, and how can you take those and use them with each other? So use them in a different way to show that you really understand what they mean. Write about why they like or dislike the poem. So a little bit presentational. Compare this to current military language, or act out the poem. So we looked at all different ways to take something rather than just reading it and saying, do I understand, do I not understand, but to move to those other 2 modes. Presentational writing and speaking using online tools, looking at different tools that we could use to then move into those interpersonal and presentational modes. Interpersonal communication, we discussed the difficulties which we've talked about tonight already, about scheduling, about time differences, about the technology. And so that's a big challenge for online educators, is when we want to move to interpersonal, we want to have students interact with each other. How do we do that when they're so far apart from each other geographically, even with different time zones? But I think in talking to our expert teachers tonight, we found out that it is possible, and there are plenty of us out there doing that. So again, talking to each other is so important so that we can learn what other people are doing that works. Nadine Jacobson McLean talked about differentiation, and she had 2 focus areas when she talked about this. One was equity and accessibility. So she's talking about differentiating her classes. Sometimes we might automatically jump to proficiency levels, which was her second topic, but she started with differentiating for accessibility, because obviously we have students with different needs in our courses, and how can we present our material so that it's accessible and equal for all students? And she began by showing us, for example, that she uses very simple backgrounds without a lot of pictures and moving things in her presentations. You know, some of us may have been taught you have to have a lot of flashy things on your slides, you got to catch the student's attention. But she's saying for people who are using things like screen readers, it can be really distracting and difficult to read. So keeping things really simple and basic can make it more accessible for students with special needs. There need to be multiple pathways to learning, alternative learning environments. Students with special needs often learn in very different ways, and we can't expect that every student in our courses, online included, is going to learn in the same way. She mentioned the fact that a lot of students with special needs are moved out of the brick and mortar classroom because their needs aren't being met there, and then they come into this online environment thinking that it's going to be very personalized, but some of these tools can make it really difficult for accessibility. So we have to keep that in mind. So she talked about the difference between equity and accessibility. She defined equity as removing barriers in order to close the achievement gap. So everybody has the right to reach their highest achievement level, and we need to remove whatever barriers those students have in order to allow them to get to that level. Accessibility is more the design of the materials and accommodating individual needs. So she gave us a checklist over here of different ways we can make things like text and images and audio more accessible, or also provide alternative pathways. This is one of her checklists, which I found helpful to sort of look through what kind of font are you using, what sort of colors are you using, how are the images displayed, and making sure that the things we have are accessible to all students. She then talked about differentiation within proficiency levels. So I can statements came up again, the ACTFL proficiency standards. This universal design, I think, plays into the accessibility question. Universal design for learning, UDL, is, again, it's flexible and it's diverse in that it has multiple pathways to the same skills and information, and that students should be given a multiple choice of ways to express themselves so that they can work in the way that works best for them. One of the things she talks about were prompts and scenarios. Sometimes we ask people to talk about their family, talk about health issues, talk about things. And she said sometimes those very personal prompts can lead students to, on the one hand, they want to talk about themselves a lot because we all know students love to talk about themselves. And when we're dealing with maybe homeschooled students or students who are geographically isolated, that this is a great opportunity. I want to talk about things, but it would lead students to sometimes what she called use outside resources, or not stick to the skill level or the skills that were being worked on in that lesson, but to want to go above and beyond and use vocabulary and language aspects that they weren't prepared for. So we brainstormed some prompts which had been successful at getting students to create with the language at the level where they were. And you can go back to the TED Ed lesson to hear some of those ideas. She brought up the idea of badges. And badges are something that the teacher or the instructor can create, but that the students can also create. She taught us about the raft strategy, where for writing, you can come up with, first of all, let me move my chat window here. The role of the writer is the R, so who is the writer? There could be many different roles that the writer plays. Then who is the audience? Then what type of a format are we talking about, and what is the topic? So it allows for a lot of flexibility and personalization for students within their writing. And students can then create different badges that once they've completed them, they can sort of add to their portfolio. And it's a great way for students to work with their own path and come up with ways where they're learning in their own way. So it is also a good way of providing meaningful and encouraging feedback. So those were, in a nutshell, let's see what time we have here. Okay, 9:22, not a lot of time. In a nutshell, those were the topics that we covered, and those were the people we heard from and some of the ideas that we brainstormed in the short amount of time that we have remaining. I guess I also do want to go through the criteria page with all of you so that everybody's clear on what they need to do in order to get the badge for this class. So let me exit out of here and go do that first so that everybody knows what is going to be required of them. And let's see, do I need to, I probably need to share a different screen, don't I, Stephen?
Yes, that's right. You've only shared this one app, so you have to back out, stop sharing, and then start sharing again.
New share. Ah, got it. Okay. I'm going to just share my whole desktop at this point. How's that? Now you're seeing everything?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So the 3-2-1 materials development, let's go to criteria. Nope.
Yeah. So the things that you're talking about right now can all be found on one page. They're all linked out from one page, yes?
Right here, criteria.
Yeah, I think the criteria page. So if you click there, everyone, this website should look familiar. You'll see that Susan has clicked on the button called criteria. And so this takes you through, she's going to go through this page. Also, I think on the technology page at the bottom is a final evaluation survey for this webinar series. Very important.
Final survey.
Evaluation survey. So just to remind everyone, please, as soon as you finish today, run and complete this final survey. It's very important for us. Thanks a lot. So, sorry, go ahead, Susan, criteria. Okay,
so the criteria for the digital badge, and some of you are going to get CEU credits. These are the criteria here for the digital badge. You attended at least 4 live webinars, and we have a log of who has attended. You participated in the discussions and activities during those webinars, which we also have a record of. And then you posted responses to the discussion prompts in all the TED Ed lessons. So those are all things that are logged and archived, and we can go back and look at. And then completing the 3-2-1 material roundup for each webinar session. And there is a tutorial that is, how did I get to that?
It's linked from the technology page. Yeah, all the steps are on the technology page.
Yeah. So the 3-2-1 material development is simply that you go through for each lesson and talk about 3 things you learned, 2 things you plan to implement in your class, and 1 question that you still have. And then there is a tutorial in how you submit that. So it's very important that you submit this in the correct way by using the tutorial, and it goes through right here. You're going to log into your Google account, open this Materials Development Roundup Google Doc, and then click on File and make a copy. Rename the Google Doc to your name - Materials Roundup Development. Click on OK. Open the new document and click Share in the upper right corner. Then click Advanced. Select anyone with the link, and then down here, Can Comment, and then Save. And then you will get the shareable link, or you can copy the link. Once you have the link, you're going to complete the Google form, which is right here, and here's a link to the Google form. This is the submission form. So once you've completed all of that, you get the link, then you go to submission form, type in your name and your email, and then you're going to paste the link right here. So basically, I will get all of these links, and I will just be able to go through and click through all of those links, and it will take me right out to your 3-2-1 roundup. And if it's not turned in that way, we'll have a hard time accessing it. So please make sure that you use this tutorial in order to turn that information in.
Just a brief note to everyone, it's okay to submit your URL if you're not quite finished with your 3-2-1 yet. Important thing is to get it in, and then do finish it so that we can give you your badge. But it doesn't matter whether the 3-2-1 roundup is actually done or not. The main thing is that you give us the URL first. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then if you're looking for CEU credit,
I'll jump in here.
Sure.
When you signed up, then you indicated whether you were interested in receiving a CEU for the 10 contact hours that we've offered you through this webinar, and you gave us the name of a supervisor. We will be contacting those people to talk about CEUs for you, because we have to deal with these on an individual basis, since the granting of CEUs works differently from district to district.
Okay, well, I think that's probably, oh, what is the deadline to complete and submit the 3-2-1, Stephen?
I think we published that somewhere, just a moment.
Is it, I see November 14th.
Yes, that's correct, November 14th.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So they all need to be turned in and completed by the 14th?
Yes, they need to be completed by the 14th. Not just give the URL, but actually finish the 321
Okay.
and all the discussion and everything. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you everyone for all of your great participation. It's been a wonderful experience working with everybody, and I have thoroughly enjoyed being involved with everyone. And I hope that you are able to take all of this information and head out into your online or blended courses and implement some excellent new stuff. I know I sure have a lot of new ideas of things to use and things to implement. Let's see, I see a couple of questions. Things are kind of moving through here. Can we go back and participate in the past discussions, meaning the TED Ed discussions?
Yes. You can post to the TED Ed discussions. As long as you post by the deadline, then we will accept that.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. Well, I have a Cubs game to go watch. I don't know what score is yet, but time to get back to that. So thank you, everybody. And we'll be seeing you in the TED Ed lessons.
Aloha, everybody. Thanks very much.
Good night.